Sometimes, the moment that changes your life doesn't feel like a miracle. It feels like exhaustion. The subway rattles beneath Manhattan, steel grinding against steel, the low hum of fluorescent lights flickering overhead as the late-night train cuts through the dark like a tired breath that never quite finishes. It's 11:47 p.m., and Sophie Carter can barely keep her eyes open. Her fingers are still curled tightly around the worn strap of her faded backpack, knuckles pale from hours of holding on. To jobs, to hope, to anything that hasn't already slipped away. Her sneakers are damp from the cold rain outside, her hoodie thin against the chill, and her stomach has been empty for longer than she wants to admit. Across the aisle, people scroll through their phones, lost in their own worlds. But Sophie isn't part of any world anymore. Not tonight. Not after the eviction notice folded inside her bag like a quiet sentence she couldn't outrun. She shifts slightly in her seat, blinking hard, trying to stay awake just long enough to figure out where she's going next. But her body has already made the decision her mind refuses to accept. Her head dips once, twice, and then, without permission, falls gently to the side. It lands against something warm. Solid. Still, Ethan Blake doesn't move. Not when her weight leans into him. Not when a strand of her damp hair brushes against the sleeve of his tailored coat. Not even when the man standing nearby raises an eyebrow, silently questioning why someone like him would allow this. Ethan simply glances down. For a moment, the world slows. The noise of the train fades into the background as he studies the girl who has just collapsed onto his shoulder like she has nowhere else left to land. Her face is pale with exhaustion, lashes resting against her cheeks, lips slightly parted as she finally gives in to sleep she didn't choose but desperately needed. He notices the small details most people would overlook, the frayed edges of her backpack, the faint ink smudge on her fingers, the corner of a crumpled document peeking out, stamped with bold red letters he doesn't need to fully read to understand. A man across the aisle shifts uncomfortably, glancing between them, then at Ethan again, as if expecting him to push her away, to restore the invisible boundary that usually separates people like him from people like her. But Ethan doesn't. Instead, he adjusts slightly, just enough to steady her, his shoulder becoming something intentional rather than accidental. When the train jerks along the tracks, he lifts his hand subtly, not touching her, but ready, just in case she slips. The car quiets around him, not because of her, but because of him. A quiet authority settles into the space, unspoken but understood. No one interrupts. No one questions further. Outside, the city blurs past in streaks of light and shadow, indifferent to the small, fragile moment unfolding inside this moving box of strangers. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Blake, millionaire, CEO, a man who built an empire on control, does something he hasn't done in years. He lets something unexpected stay. The train slows as it approaches the next station, the screech of metal against metal pulling the world back into motion, but Sophie does not stir. Her breathing remains soft, uneven, like someone who has been running for far too long and finally collapsed at the finish line without knowing if she had won or lost. Ethan glances up briefly as the doors slide open, a rush of cold air spilling into the car, along with a few late-night passengers who step in and immediately pause when they notice the scene. A young woman asleep on a stranger's shoulder is not unusual in this city, but the man she leans on is. Even in something as ordinary as a subway seat, Ethan carries the kind of presence that makes people hesitate without understanding why. A man in a security uniform at the far end of the car shifts his stance, recognizing him, then quickly looks away, choosing silence over curiosity. Ethan's phone vibrates once in his pocket, sharp and precise against the stillness of the moment. He does not check it right away. Instead, his gaze drifts back down to Sophie, to the way her fingers still clutch that worn strap, as if letting go would mean losing the last piece of herself she has left. Carefully, almost instinctively, he reaches out and adjusts the position of her backpack so it does not slip from her lap. The motion is small, controlled, but deliberate. He is not used to noticing details like this. He is used to contracts, numbers, negotiations that stretch across boardrooms and skyscrapers. Yet here, in the quiet rhythm of a midnight train, none of that seems to matter. Another stop passes. Then another. The city continues outside, indifferent, relentless, but inside this narrow space, time feels slower, heavier, as if it is waiting for something to happen. Sophie shifts slightly, her head pressing a little closer against his shoulder, seeking warmth she does not even realize she has found. Ethan exhales slowly, his posture steady, allowing it. A faint crease forms between his brows, not from discomfort, but from something unfamiliar. Recognition, perhaps. Not of her, but of the feeling itself. The idea that someone could trust without asking, could lean without permission, could simply exist without expecting anything in return. His phone vibrates again. This time, he takes it out, glancing at the screen. A message from his assistant, marked urgent, followed by another and another. A schedule, a delay, a decision waiting for him somewhere far above ground, in a world that demands his constant attention. Ethan looks at the messages for a brief second, then locks the screen without replying. The train begins to empty as midnight creeps closer. Seats open up, space expands, but he does not move. He does not shift her away, does not wake her, does not remind her that this moment is temporary. Instead, he lifts his hand slightly and taps the metal pole beside him, a quiet signal. The conductor, watching through the small window at the end of the car, nods almost imperceptibly. The train pauses a second longer than usual before continuing forward. It is subtle, nearly invisible to anyone else, but it is enough. Enough to give her a few more minutes. Enough to let her rest just a little longer in a place where, for once, no one is asking anything from her. And Ethan Blake, a man who controls entire companies with a single decision, chooses in that moment to control only one thing. He chooses not to interrupt her peace. The train finally begins to slow again, this time longer, heavier, as if the night itself is starting to settle. A soft chime echoes overhead, announcing the next stop, and something in Sophie's breathing changes. It is subtle at first, a slight tension in her shoulders, a faint shift of her fingers against the worn fabric of her backpack. Then her lashes flutter. Once, twice. Reality begins to return in fragments. The hum of the train, the cold air brushing against her cheek, and then the warmth beneath her temple. Her eyes open suddenly. Confusion hits first, then awareness. Sophie jerks upright, her heart racing as she pulls back too quickly, nearly dropping her bag in the process. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," she blurts out, her voice rough with exhaustion and embarrassment, cheeks flushing as she tries to make sense of what just happened. She glances at him, really looks at him for the first time, and something in her expression shifts again. Not recognition, not yet, but a quiet hesitation. Ethan does not react the way most people would. No irritation, no awkwardness, just a calm, measured gaze as if the moment had been expected all along. "It is fine," he says simply, his voice low, steady, controlled in a way that feels out of place in a subway car that smells faintly of metal and rain. Sophie swallows, adjusting the strap on her shoulder, trying to gather what little dignity she has left. "I did not mean to. I have just been working, and I guess She stops herself, realizing she is explaining too much to someone who does not know her and probably does not care. Her fingers tighten around the zipper of her bag, and for a second, she considers getting off at the next stop, regardless of where it is, just to escape the weight of the moment. But then she notices something strange. The space around them. The way the remaining passengers seem quieter, more distant. The way a man standing nearby avoids making eye contact with the person she just leaned on. Sophie glances back at Ethan, this time more carefully. His coat is not just clean, it is precise. His watch catches a flicker of light, understated but unmistakably expensive. Even the way he sits feels different, not relaxed, not tense, just completely certain of where he belongs. And suddenly, Sophie feels very aware of where she does not belong. "I should go," she says quickly, shifting toward the edge of her seat as the train begins to slow again. The doors slide open with a soft mechanical sigh, and she stands, adjusting her backpack, ready to disappear into the night before this moment can stretch any further. "Wait." The word stops her. Not loud, not forceful, but enough. Sophie turns back, hesitant. Ethan reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a small, simple card. No flourish. No explanation. He holds it out to her like it is nothing, like it does not carry any weight at all. "If you need a place to start again," he says, his eyes meeting hers in a way that feels deliberate, Go there. Sophie hesitates. Her instincts tell her to refuse, to protect what little pride she has left, to walk away before she owes anything to anyone. But something in his tone is different. There is no pity in it. No expectation. Just a quiet certainty that she might need it, even if she does not want to admit it yet. Slowly, she reaches out and takes the card. Their fingers do not touch, but the space between them feels charged with something unspoken. She glances down at it, but the train doors begin to close before she can fully read the name. When she looks up again, Ethan is already leaning back in his seat, his attention shifting away as if the moment has ended for him. But for Sophie, it has just begun. She steps off the train into the cold night air, the card still held tightly in her hand, her heart pounding with a question she cannot yet answer. Why would a stranger like him do something like this for someone like her? Cold air hits Sophie the moment she steps onto the platform, sharp and unforgiving, wrapping around her like a reminder that whatever warmth she had just experienced is already gone. The train doors slide shut behind her with a quiet finality, and she stands there for a second longer than necessary, fingers tightening around the small card in her hand, as if it might disappear if she loosens her grip. Around her, the station is nearly empty. A flickering overhead light hums softly, casting uneven shadows across the concrete floor. Somewhere in the distance, a vending machine buzzes, the only other sound in a place that feels forgotten by the rest of the city. Sophie exhales slowly, her breath visible in the cold air, and finally looks down at the card. The surface is thick, clean, nothing like the worn edges of the things she owns. Her eyes scan the letters once, then again, and then her stomach drops. Ethan Blake. The name alone carries weight, but it is the line beneath it that makes her pulse spike. Chief Executive Officer. Blake Holdings. Sophie freezes. Even if she does not follow business news closely, she has heard the name before. Everyone has. The kind of company that owns buildings she could never afford to enter, creates opportunities she has never been close enough to touch. And suddenly, the memory of the train shifts in her mind. The silence. The space. The way people looked at him without looking too long. It was not just presence. It was power. No way. She whispers under her breath, shaking her head as if denying it might make it less real. Her first instinct is to laugh it off, to assume it is some kind of mistake, maybe even a joke she does not understand. People like him do not sit on subway trains at midnight. People like him do not let strangers fall asleep on their shoulder. And they definitely do not hand out invitations to start over. Sophie closes her eyes for a moment, pressing the card lightly against her palm as if grounding herself. This does not change anything, she tells herself. It cannot. Her situation is still the same. No apartment. No steady job. No plan for tomorrow morning. The weight of that reality settles back in, heavier now, because for a brief moment on that train, she had forgotten it. She slips the card into the front pocket of her backpack, zipping it up quickly, almost defensively, as if hiding it will keep it from interfering with whatever fragile sense of control she still has. Then she starts walking. The stairs leading out of the station feel longer than usual, each step echoing softly in the empty space. By the time she reaches the street, the city greets her the way it always does, indifferent, moving, alive in a way that does not notice her at all. Cars pass. Neon lights flicker in storefront windows. A group of people laugh as they walk by, their voices warm and easy, untouched by the kind of night Sophie is having. She pulls her hoodie tighter around herself and keeps moving, not toward anywhere specific, just away from the station, away from the moment that feels too strange to hold on to. But as she walks, her hand drifts back to her bag, fingers brushing lightly against the pocket, where the card rests. She tells herself she is not going to use it, that she does not need help from someone like him, that she will figure things out the way she always has. Still, she does not throw it away. And somewhere deep down, beneath the exhaustion and the doubt, a quiet thought begins to form, small but persistent. What if this is not a mistake? The night stretches longer than Sophie expects. Hours seem to blur together as she walks block after block, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement, turning everything into a shifting pattern of gold and gray. By the time her legs begin to ache, the adrenaline that kept her moving fades, leaving only the quiet weight of reality settling back in. She finds herself outside a small 24-hour diner, The kind with flickering neon signs and fogged-up windows, where the smell of coffee leaks into the street. For a moment, she stands there, staring inside at people sitting in warm booths, hands wrapped around mugs, conversations soft and unhurried. It feels like another world. Her stomach tightens again, reminding her she has not eaten since earlier that afternoon. Sophie reaches into her pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills and coins, counting them quickly under the streetlight. Not enough for a real meal. Maybe just coffee. Maybe nothing at all. She hesitates, then exhales and pushes the door open. A small bell rings overhead as she steps inside, greeted by the low hum of conversation and the steady clink of dishes. The warmth hits her immediately, almost overwhelming after the cold outside. She slides into a corner booth, trying to make herself small, invisible, like she has done so many times before. A waitress approaches with a tired but kind smile. Coffee. Sophie nods, her voice quiet. Just coffee. The mug arrives a minute later, steam rising in soft curls, and she wraps her hands around it, letting the heat seep into her fingers. For a few minutes, she just sits there, staring into the dark surface, letting her thoughts drift without direction. But they always circle back to the same thing. The card. Almost reluctantly, she reaches into her backpack and pulls it out again, placing it on the table beside her mug. Under the diner's dim light, it looks even more out of place here, too clean, too precise, like it belongs in a different world entirely. Ethan Blake. The name feels heavier now, not just because of who he is, but because of what he offered without saying it directly. A place to start again. Sophie shakes her head slightly, letting out a small, disbelieving breath. People like him do not just help people like me, she murmurs under her breath. She has learned that lesson the hard way. Nothing comes without a cost. Nothing is ever that simple. And yet, she remembers the train. The way he did not push her away. The way he did not ask questions or expect anything in return. The way he looked at her, not like she was a problem to solve or a burden to avoid, but like she was just there. Human. The thought unsettles her more than it comforts her. She takes a sip of the coffee, wincing slightly at the bitterness, but it helps clear her mind just enough to think. Outside, a car passes, headlights briefly illuminating the window, casting a reflection of her sitting alone in the booth. For a second, she barely recognizes herself. Tired, worn down, stuck in a life that feels like it is shrinking instead of growing. Her gaze drops back to the card. Slowly, she turns it over in her fingers, tracing the edges. What if this is not about him? She whispers softly, almost afraid of the thought forming in her mind. What if this is about me choosing something different? The idea lingers, quiet but persistent. Not hope, not yet, just a possibility. And for someone who has been running out of options, even that feels dangerous. Sophie finishes her coffee slowly, buying herself time she does not really have. When she finally stands, placing a few coins on the table, she hesitates one last time, looking down at the card in her hand. Then, without fully letting herself think it through, she slips it back into her pocket. Not thrown away, not forgotten, just kept. And as she steps back out into the cold, the city no longer feels exactly the same as it did before. Something has shifted, even if she cannot name it yet. The sky begins to lighten just slightly by the time Sophie finally stops walking. It is not sunrise yet, but the deep black of night has softened into a dark gray, the kind that makes everything feel suspended between endings and beginnings. She finds herself standing across the street from a building she has only ever seen from a distance. Tall, glass, impossibly clean compared to everything around it. Blake Holdings. The name stretches across the front in sleek metal letters that catch the early morning light like they belong to a different world entirely. Sophie stands still on the sidewalk, her hands buried deep in the pockets of her hoodie, staring up at the building as if it might disappear if she looks away. This is it. The address on the card. The place he told her to go if she wanted a chance. A real chance. Her heart starts to beat faster, not from walking this time, but from something far more unsettling. Choice. She pulls the card out again, checking it as if the words might have changed overnight, as if she somehow misunderstood. But the name is still there. The address is still the same. And the building in front of her is very real. People begin to pass by now. Early commuters in pressed suits and polished shoes, coffee cups in hand, moving with purpose. Sophie watches them for a moment, noticing how easily they walk through the revolving doors, how natural it looks for them to belong there. Then she looks down at herself. Damp sneakers, faded hoodie, a backpack that has seen better days. The contrast is impossible to ignore. You do not belong here. A voice in her head whispers, quiet but firm. It sounds like every rejection she has ever received, every door that has closed before she could even knock. Sophie exhales slowly, her breath visible in the cool air, and takes a small step forward. Then stops. Her hand tightens around the card. Pride rises first. The instinct to turn around, to walk away before she can be turned away again. It would be easier, safer, familiar. But then another thought pushes through, softer but stronger than she expects. You already have nothing left to lose. The words settle into her chest, heavy but undeniable. She thinks about the eviction notice, the empty nights ahead, the way she has been surviving, not living. And suddenly, turning away does not feel like safety anymore. It feels like staying stuck. Sophie lifts her head again, her gaze steadying as she looks at the building. One more time. This time, she does not see just glass and steel. She sees a possibility, a door she has never been allowed to walk through before. Her steps are slow at first, cautious, like she is testing the ground beneath her. But each step becomes a little more certain, a little more intentional. By the time she reaches the entrance, her heart is pounding so loudly she can hear it in her ears. The revolving door stands in front of her, moving smoothly as people pass through without hesitation. Sophie pauses just outside, her reflection staring back at her in the glass. For a brief second, doubt flickers again. Who do you think you are? The question hangs there, sharp and familiar. But this time, she does not answer it the way she used to. Instead, she reaches forward and pushes the door. The glass moves. The world shifts. And just like that, Sophie Carter steps into a place she was never meant to be. The moment Sophie steps inside, the world changes. The air feels different, cooler, filtered, carrying a faint scent of polished wood and something subtle she cannot name. The noise of the city disappears behind her, replaced by a quiet, controlled rhythm of footsteps, soft voices, and the distant hum of elevators gliding up and down invisible tracks. The lobby stretches wide and open, sunlight pouring in through floor-to-ceiling windows, reflecting off marble floors so clean they almost mirror the ceiling above. Sophie slows down without meaning to, her sneakers barely making a sound as she takes in everything around her. People move with purpose here. No hesitation. No second-guessing. Men and women in tailored suits walk past her, their conversations low and focused, eyes forward, as if every second matters. No one looks lost. No one looks like her. Her grip tightens on the strap of her backpack again, a familiar anchor in a place that feels anything but. She hesitates just a few steps inside, unsure where to go, suddenly aware of how out of place she must seem. Then she notices the front desk. Sleek. Minimal. A woman stands behind it, composed and professional, her posture perfect, her expression neutral but attentive. Sophie swallows, forcing herself to move forward, each step heavier than the last. Hi, she says softly when she reaches the desk, her voice almost disappearing in the open space. The receptionist looks up, her gaze quick but sharp, taking in Sophie's appearance in a single glance. Not judgmental, just assessing. How can I help you? She asks politely. Sophie hesitates for a fraction of a second, then reaches into her pocket and places the card on the desk between them. The movement feels bigger than it should, like she is placing more than just a piece of paper down. The receptionist's eyes flick to the card, and something changes instantly. It is subtle, but unmistakable. Her posture straightens just slightly more. Her expression shifts from polite to precise. One moment, she says, her tone now carrying a different weight. She picks up the card carefully, as if it matters, and taps something into her computer. Sophie stands there, heart pounding, every second stretching longer than it should. Around her, people continue moving, the world of this building unaffected by her presence, yet she feels like everything is about to shift. The receptionist looks back up at her. Please wait here. No explanation. No questions. Just that. Sophie nods, stepping back slightly, unsure whether to feel relieved or more anxious. Minutes pass. Or maybe it is only one. It feels longer. Then she hears it. the soft chime of an elevator opening somewhere behind her. Footsteps approach, steady, unhurried, but carrying a quiet authority that makes the space around them subtly adjust. Sophie turns, and there he is. Ethan Blake walks toward her as if this place bends around him without effort, his presence the same as it was on the train, but amplified here, where everything reflects who he is. His eyes find hers immediately, not surprised, not questioning, just certain, like he knew she would come. Sophie's breath catches slightly, the weight of everything hitting her at once. The card, the building, the choice she made just by walking through that door. Ethan stops a few feet in front of her, his expression calm, controlled, but there is something else there now, something quieter. You came, he says, not as a question, as a fact. Sophie nods, her voice barely steady. I almost did not. A faint pause. Then, the smallest hint of a shift in his gaze, something that feels like approval, but without saying it. But you did, he replies. And somehow, those 3 words feel like the beginning of something she cannot yet see. For a moment, neither of them moves. The noise of the lobby continues around them, quiet footsteps, distant conversations, the soft chime of elevators, but it all fades into the background as Sophie stands there, facing the man who somehow exists in 2 completely different worlds at once. The stranger from the subway, the CEO of this entire building, the one who gave her a choice when she had none left. Sophie shifts her weight slightly, suddenly aware of everything at once. The way her clothes still carry the chill of the night. The way her hair is not quite in place. The way she does not look like someone who belongs in front of him. Ethan, on the other hand, seems untouched by any of it. Composed. Grounded. Certain. Come with me, he says, his tone calm, but not commanding. More like an invitation than an order. Sophie hesitates for half a second, then nods. She falls into step beside him as he turns toward the elevators, her pace slightly slower, as if she is still catching up to the reality of where she is. People part subtly as he walks, not dramatically, but enough to make it clear that his presence carries weight here. Sophie notices it this time. The way conversations lower when he passes. The way employees straighten just slightly. The way no one questions where he is going, or who he is bringing with him. The elevator doors open before they even reach them. Inside, everything is quiet, polished, reflective. Sophie steps in, standing near the corner, her hands clasped together loosely in front of her as the doors close. The space feels smaller now, more intimate, the silence heavier without the distraction of the lobby. The elevator begins to rise smoothly, almost without sensation. Sophie glances at the panel. The numbers climb higher, far higher than she expected. I do not understand, she says finally, her voice careful, not accusing, just honest. Why me? The question lingers in the air between them. Simple, but carrying everything she has been holding back since the train. Ethan does not answer immediately. His gaze remains forward, thoughtful, as if choosing his words matters. Because you did not ask for anything, he says after a moment. Sophie frowns slightly, confused. I was asleep, she replies, almost defensively. A faint shift crosses his expression, not quite a smile, but something close. Exactly. The elevator continues upward. Sophie processes that, her mind trying to connect something that feels just out of reach. People usually want something. He continues, his tone steady. Attention, money, opportunity, even kindness can come with expectations. He finally looks at her, his eyes direct but not harsh. You did not even know who I was. You just trusted the moment. Sophie looks down briefly, her fingers tightening together. I was just tired, she says quietly. Ethan nods once. And honest, he adds. The word lands differently than she expects. Honest. Not weak. Not desperate. Not lost. Honest. The elevator slows, then stops. The doors slide open to a floor that looks nothing like the lobby below. Quieter. More private. Large windows stretching out over the city, the skyline just beginning to catch the early light of morning. Ethan steps out first, then pauses just slightly, giving her space to follow rather than leading too far ahead. Sophie steps out after him, her eyes drawn immediately to the view. For a moment, she forgets everything else. The city looks different from up here. Smaller. Manageable. Possible. Ethan watches her for a brief second, then gestures toward a hallway ahead. There is something I want you to see, he says. Sophie turns back to him, hesitation flickering again, but weaker now. Because somewhere between the train and this moment, something inside her has already shifted. She nods, just once, and follows him forward, not knowing that whatever waits ahead is not just an opportunity. It is the beginning of a life she never thought she would be allowed to have. The hallway is quiet, the kind of quiet that feels intentional, as if every sound here has been carefully controlled. Sophie follows Ethan at a measured pace, her footsteps softer now against the polished floor, her eyes taking in every detail without knowing exactly what she is looking for. They stop in front of a set of double glass doors. Ethan pushes them open without hesitation, stepping aside slightly, as if inviting her to enter first. Sophie pauses for just a second, then steps inside. The room is not what she expects. It is not a boardroom, not an office filled with screens and contracts. Instead, it feels open, warm in a way that the rest of the building is not. Large windows let in the early morning light, casting a soft glow across the space. Along one wall, there are framed designs, sketches, and concepts pinned neatly in rows. On another, shelves filled with materials, samples, ideas waiting to become something real. Sophie takes a few steps forward, her gaze drawn instinctively to the sketches. She leans closer, her fingers hovering just above the paper, not touching, but close enough to feel the texture. These are not random. They are intentional, creative, alive. "What is this?" she asks quietly, her voice carrying a different tone now, something softer, more engaged. Ethan watches her for a moment before answering. "It is a new division," he says. "Design, development, creative projects that have not been given space before." Sophie turns slightly, her brow furrowing. "And you are showing this to me because..." She trails off, the question unfinished but clear. Ethan steps a little closer, not too close, just enough to be part of the same moment. "Because I saw something on that train," he says simply. Sophie shakes her head lightly, almost laughing at the idea. "I was asleep," she repeats, the same defense, but weaker now. Ethan does not argue. Instead, he gestures subtly toward her backpack. "May I?" Sophie hesitates, then slowly nods. He does not reach into it himself. He waits, giving her the choice. After a second, Sophie opens the zipper and pulls out the worn contents. The folded eviction notice, the crumpled papers, and then the sketch. She almost does not take it out, almost hides it again. But something in the room, in the moment, makes her place it in his hand instead. Ethan studies it quietly. The lines are not perfect, but they are thoughtful, intentional. There is emotion in them, perspective, a sense of something unfinished but real. He looks back up at her. "This is why," he says. Sophie feels her breath catch, not because of what he says, but because of how he says it. There is no exaggeration, no empty praise, just recognition, real and steady. "I used to draw more," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. Before things got, she does not finish the sentence. She does not need to. Ethan nods once, understanding more than she expects. "You still can," he says. The simplicity of it lands harder than anything else. Not "you could," not "maybe." You still can. Sophie looks around the room again, at the sketches on the walls, the materials, the space that feels like possibility instead of pressure. "I do not have experience," she says quietly. "I do not have connections. I do not even have..." She stops, the words catching in her throat. "A place to go." Ethan finishes the thought without saying it out loud. "Then we start there," he says. No hesitation, no conditions, just a beginning. Sophie stands there, the weight of everything she has been carrying slowly shifting into something lighter, something she is not used to holding. Not certainty, not security, but direction. She looks at him, really looks this time, not as a stranger, not as a CEO, but as the person who saw her at her lowest and did not turn away. "Why are you doing this?" she asks again, softer now. Ethan holds her gaze for a moment, then answers in the simplest way possible. "Because someone should have done it sooner." The room falls quiet again, but it is not empty. It is full of something new, something neither of them fully names yet. Sophie nods slowly, her grip on the sketch tightening just slightly, not out of fear this time, but out of something closer to belief. And as the first light of morning spreads across the city outside, she realizes that for the first time in a long time, she is not just surviving the day ahead. She is stepping into it.